Welcome to Shadow Fable, where the shadows come alive, and every legend has its price. Tonight, we bring you a tale of haunting whispers and a carnival that feeds on souls. It started with a rumor, the kind you'd hear whispered in the hallways at school or passed around the campfire during late summer nights. They said the old Lake Shawnee amusement park in West Virginia was cursed. Closed for decades after a string of tragic accidents, it was a place locals avoided. But when the carnival arrived, bright lights and distant laughter transforming the abandoned park, it was too tempting to resist. Jess Parker wasn't like most kids in her quiet town. Her connection to the park ran deeper. Her grandfather, a ride operator there in the 1960s, had always warned her, never step foot in that place. Bad things happen there. But when her best friend, Kevin, dared her to check out the carnival, she couldn't back down. "Come on, Jess," Kevin said, bouncing a flashlight in his hand. "You can't tell me you're scared of some old fairground." Jess rolled her eyes but didn't reply. The truth was, she was scared. Something about the carnival didn't sit right with her. The colors were too vivid, the music too cheerful, and the laughter? It sounded hollow, like it was coming from somewhere far away. "Fine," she muttered. "But we're just looking, no stupid dares." Kevin grinned, his confidence masking something darker. What Jess didn't know was that Kevin had his own reasons for wanting to visit the park. His cousin Mark had disappeared there years ago. The family never talked about it, but Kevin needed answers, even if it meant facing the park's eerie reputation. The air grew colder as they approached the entrance. Rusted rides loomed like skeletal shadows against the night sky. But the carnival itself was alive. Strings of golden lights swayed in the breeze, and a faint, haunting melody drifted through the air. "See?" Kevin said, gesturing toward the glowing carousel. "Not so scary." Jess didn't respond. Her eyes were fixed on a banner above the entrance that read, "The Midnight Carnival, One Night Only." The letters shimmered as if written in liquid gold. They wandered deeper into the park, passing game booths and food stalls that seemed untouched by time. A clown with a painted smile waved at them, his movements slow and deliberate. Jess felt her stomach churn. "Let's go," she said, tugging Kevin's sleeve. "This place is wrong." "Not yet," Kevin replied, his gaze locked on a sign pointing to the midnight mirror. "Just one more thing." The tent housing the midnight mirror was larger than it seemed from the outside. Inside, the air was thick and heavy, and mirrors of all shapes and sizes lined the walls. In the center stood an ornate, full-length mirror with a gilded frame. "You first," Kevin said, nudging Jess forward. "No way," she shot back. "This was your idea." Kevin sighed and stepped up to the mirror. At first, his reflection seemed normal, but then it smiled. A slow, sinister grin that didn't match his own expression. Jess froze as Kevin's body stiffened, his eyes wide with terror. "Kevin!" she screamed, but it was too late. The mirror rippled like water, and Kevin vanished, leaving only his flashlight clattering to the ground. Jess's breath came in ragged gasps as she stared at the mirror. Then she heard it. Kevin's voice, faint and echoing. "Jess, help me." Her hands trembled as she reached for the mirror. The surface was cold, yet it seemed to pull her in. Steeling herself, Jess stepped through. On the other side, the world was warped. The carnival was darker, the laughter more sinister. Shadows moved without form, and the rides creaked as if alive. Jess clutched Kevin's flashlight, her only source of comfort. "Kevin!" she called, her voice trembling, Where are you?" The answer came not from Kevin, but from a figure emerging from the shadows. It was the clown from earlier, its painted smile now a gaping maw. "You've come too far," it hissed, "but perhaps you can make a trade." Jess's heart pounded as the clown explained. The carnival fed on souls, trapping them in the mirror's endless maze. To free Kevin, Jess had to offer something of equal value. "What do you want?" she whispered, tears streaming down her face. The clown leaned closer, its breath icy. "Your memories of your grandfather, of your family, the moments that anchor you to this world." Jess hesitated. Her grandfather's warnings echoed in her mind, but so did Kevin's laughter, his friendship. "Take them," she said, her voice breaking. "Just let him go." The clown grinned, and Jess felt a sharp, searing pain as her memories began to fade. Images of her grandfather, his stories, his smile, all slipped away like sand through her fingers. Jess woke on the ground outside the mirror tent, Kevin beside her. He was pale but alive, his hand clutching hers. "Jess, what happened?" he murmured. She smiled weakly, though she didn't know why. "It's over," she said, though the hollowness in her heart told her otherwise. As they stumbled out of the park, Jess glanced back. The carnival lights flickered and faded, the laughter dying with the wind. But the banner remained, its golden letters shimmering in the moonlight. The Midnight Carnival. One night only. Jess would never remember why she felt so connected to the place, but she knew one thing: some memories were worth losing if it meant saving the ones you loved. And so, the Midnight Carnival vanished as mysteriously as it appeared, leaving only whispers in its wake. Some say the park remains cursed, waiting for its next visitors. Others believe it's just a story to keep kids away from the ruins. But Jess and Kevin know the truth, and they'll carry it with them forever. Do you dare to visit the Midnight Carnival? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Tonight, we take a journey into Huntsville, Alabama, to uncover the sinister secrets of a place steeped in tragedy and myth. Beside the vast Maple Hill Cemetery lies a forgotten playground. Known as the Dead Children's Playground, it's a site of whispers, strange occurrences, and, as some claim, a doorway to another realm. It's said that after the sun sets, the voices of long-lost children fill the air. But not all voices belong to the innocent, and not all who visit come back the same. The evening wind tore through the trees, making the branches shudder like skeletal fingers. The chains of the swings clanged softly, the sound faint but persistent, as if some unseen force gave them life. Daniel lingered at the edge of the playground, his heart pounding against his ribcage. He knew he shouldn't be here, but the compulsion was stronger than his fear, stronger even than reason. Emily. Her name was a ghost in his mind, as vivid as the day she left him. It had been 6 months since the accident, but Daniel still felt her presence in every empty room, every laugh that wasn't hers. He'd tried to move on, tried to fill the void she'd left behind, but the emptiness grew hungrier with each passing day. And then he'd heard about this place. It had been a passing comment at grief counseling, spoken by a mother whose voice trembled with unspoken pain.
"The Dead Children's Playground,"
she'd said.
"Some people, they hear things there, see things, feel things."
The others dismissed it, calling it folklore, a cruel trick of the imagination. But Daniel had clung to her words. What if? What if she was right? What if he could see Emily again? And so here he was, standing on the edge of the playground as the sun dipped below the horizon. In his hands, He clutched Emily's favorite stuffed bunny, its fur worn and patchy from years of love. It was all he had left of her, a fragment of a life that felt more like a dream with each passing day. Daniel stepped hesitantly onto the playground, the gravel crunching beneath his boots. The equipment, once painted in cheerful primary colors, was now faded and rusted, like a memory decaying with time. The swings swayed lightly in the breeze, their chains groaning softly. The slide stood crooked, its metal surface tarnished and dull. The merry-go-round, Daniel noticed, was perfectly still, yet something about it felt wrong. He sat down on the lone bench, placing the bunny on his lap. His fingers traced the worn stitching as the memories threatened to overwhelm him. He remembered Emily's laughter, the way she'd insist he push her higher on the swings, her cries of,
"Again, Daddy, again!"
echoing through the park. He'd do anything to hear that laugh again. The sun slipped below the horizon, and the playground seemed to shift. The colors drained from the world, leaving everything cloaked in shades of gray and black. The air grew colder, biting at his skin. And then it happened. Laughter. It was faint at first, like a distant echo, but it grew louder, clearer. High-pitched giggles, the unmistakable sound of children at play. Daniel froze, his breath hitching in his chest. He turned his head toward the sound, his eyes scanning the empty playground. The swings moved again, this time faster, as if pushed by invisible hands.
"Emily,"
he whispered, his voice trembling. The laughter stopped. The silence that followed was heavier than anything Daniel had ever experienced. It pressed against him, making it hard to breathe. Then, slowly, one of the swings came to a halt. The other kept moving, back and forth, back and forth. Daniel rose from the bench, his legs shaky. He clutched the bunny tightly as he stepped toward the swings.
"Emily!"
he called again, louder this time. His voice echoed back to him, hollow and empty. And then he saw it. In the sand beneath the moving swing, footprints appeared. Tiny, childlike footprints, pressed into the earth as if someone were standing there. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. The footprints led away from the swing, one after the other, heading toward the slide. His feet carried him forward before his mind could catch up. He followed the trail, his heart pounding like a drumbeat in his ears. The footprints stopped at the base of the slide, and for a moment, Daniel thought he saw something move. A shadow, small and fleeting, darting just out of sight.
"Daddy?"
The voice was soft, hesitant. It came from behind him. Daniel spun around, his pulse racing. The playground was empty. The bunny slipped from his grasp, falling into the sand. Daniel told himself he wouldn't return. But the next night, as the sun dipped low in the sky, he found himself walking the familiar path to the playground. This time, he brought a photo of Emily. It was one of his favorites. She was sitting on the swing, her smile wide and bright, the bunny clutched tightly in her arms. The moment he stepped onto the playground, the air changed. It was colder, heavier. The swings were already moving, their chains squealing in the stillness. Laughter rang out again, louder than before, more distinct. Daniel's hands trembled as he pulled the photo from his pocket.
"Daddy!"
The voice made him freeze. He turned slowly, his eyes wide. She was there, standing at the edge of the playground, just beyond the reach of the lamplight. Her hair fell in soft curls, her dress fluttering slightly in the breeze. She held out her hand.
"Emily?"
Daniel's voice cracked as he said her name. The figure smiled, but there was something wrong with it, something too perfect, too still. She turned and ran, her feet barely touching the ground. Without thinking, Daniel chased after her, his desperation overpowering his fear. She led him deeper into the woods, the laughter growing louder, more chaotic. Shadows moved around him, darting between the trees. Whispers joined the laughter, unintelligible but insistent. Daniel stumbled into a clearing, the moonlight casting long shadows across the ground. Emily stood in the center, her back to him.
Emily,
He whispered, stepping closer. She turned. Her face was not her own. The next day, Daniel sat on the bench, staring at the burned photograph. He barely noticed the elderly woman approach until she spoke.
You shouldn't be here.
She said.
This place doesn't bring them back. It takes more.
Daniel looked at her, his eyes hollow.
I saw her.
He said.
I heard her.
The woman shook her head.
It wasn't her. It never is.
The playground was alive with movement when Daniel arrived. The swings clanged wildly, the merry-go-round spun on its own, and the laughter was deafening. Emily stood in the center, her hand outstretched.
Come with me, Daddy.
Daniel stepped forward, tears streaming down his face.
Emily,
He whispered, reaching out to her. Her hand was ice cold. The world shattered around him, plunging him into darkness. The laughter turned to screams, and Daniel's cries joined them, lost in the void. The next morning, the playground was still. In the sandbox, a burned bunny lay buried in the dirt. Mrs. Harper, watching from her window, sighed and turned away.
They never learn.
She muttered. The dead children's playground waited, silent and hungry for its next visitor. Tonight, we take you into the eerie halls of the Winchester Mansion, a sprawling architectural enigma in San Jose, California. Many have walked through its halls, but few understand the true depth of the secrets it holds. This story begins with two teenagers, Ava and Derek, whose curiosity leads them into a night they will never forget.
No way am I stepping into that house.
Ava said, her arms crossed as she leaned against the hood of Derek's car. The full moon cast its pale light over the infamous Winchester Mansion, its twisted corridors and towering gables silhouetted against the night sky. The cold night air carried the faint hum of distant crickets, only adding to the unnerving stillness of the scene. Derek smirked, holding up his phone to record.
Come on, Ava. It's just an old house. They even give tours during the day. What's the worst that could happen?
Ava's eyes narrowed.
During the day, sure. But no one in their right mind comes here after dark. Everyone knows this place is cursed.
Cursed?
Derek repeated, his tone mocking.
Sounds like a challenge to me.
A challenge? You're ridiculous.
Ava shot back, trying to sound exasperated, but a hint of nervousness betrayed her. She glanced at the mansion again, its countless windows glinting like watchful eyes. Before Ava could protest further, Derek was already jogging toward the front gates, his flashlight beam bouncing erratically. Ava groaned but followed. The things she did for her best friend, or was it something more? Their footsteps crunched on the gravel path, and the mansion seemed to grow larger with every step. The front door creaked open with a sound that made Ava's skin crawl. Inside, the air was heavy, almost oppressive, and carried the faint scent of dust and decay. Shadows danced eerily on the high walls as Derek's flashlight cut through the darkness.
This is a bad idea.
Ava whispered. Her voice barely carried in the cavernous foyer, where ornate chandeliers hung like skeletal remains of a bygone era. The grandeur of the mansion was undeniable, but so was its eerie atmosphere. Derek waved her off.
Relax. It's just a house. Let's see what's so scary about it.
As they ventured deeper, the mansion's bizarre layout became apparent. Staircases led to nowhere, Doors opened to brick walls, and hallways twisted like a maze. Derek, ever the thrill-seeker, was enthralled, filming everything with his phone.
Look at this.
He said, pointing to a door that opened to a sudden drop.
The widow who built this place, Sarah Winchester, thought she could confuse the spirits chasing her. Pretty clever, huh?
Or pretty desperate.
Ava muttered. She couldn't shake the feeling that the walls themselves were watching, their intricate wood carvings twisting into menacing shapes in the dim light. The floor beneath them groaned with every step, and the oppressive silence was broken only by their whispered exchanges and the faint hum of Derek's phone recording. Ava felt her unease grow as they delved deeper, the mansion's strange architecture seemingly shifting around them. The temperature dropped suddenly as they entered a narrow corridor. Ava shivered and wrapped her arms around herself, her breath visible in the sudden chill.
Do you feel that?
She asked, her voice trembling. Derek turned to her, his brow furrowed.
Feel what?
Before Ava could answer, a faint whisper echoed through the hall. It wasn't words, just a low, mournful sound that seemed to come from all directions. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end.
Tell me you heard that.
Ava said, her voice shaking. Derek nodded slowly, his bravado slipping.
Yeah, I heard it.
The whisper grew louder, morphing into a chorus of voices, each overlapping the other. Panic set in as they realized the sound wasn't just surrounding them, it was closing in.
We need to leave,
Ava said, tugging at Derek's arm. Her heart pounded in her chest as the whispers seemed to press against her, suffocating her with their intensity.
Wait!
He said, pointing his flashlight toward the end of the hallway. A shadow moved, not theirs. The beam of light trembled as Derek held it steady, illuminating the shape of a figure that seemed to dissolve into the darkness. They followed the shadow, unable to resist the pull of curiosity. It led them to a parlor filled with antique furniture, its walls lined with dusty bookshelves. In the center of the room stood a single rocking chair, swaying gently despite the absence of any breeze. The faint smell of lavender and something metallic filled the air.
Okay, I've seen enough,
Ava said, backing toward the door. Her voice cracked, betraying her mounting fear. The chair stopped moving. A figure materialized in its place, an ethereal woman in a black Victorian dress. Her eyes were hollow, her face twisted with sorrow.
Leave this place,
She whispered, her voice echoing unnaturally.
It is not for the living.
Ava froze, but Derek's phone was still recording. He opened his mouth to speak, but the spirit turned her gaze to him, and his words died in his throat.
They're watching,
She said, her voice a mix of warning and despair.
They're always watching.
The words lingered in the air like a chilling promise. Before they could react, the spirit vanished, leaving the room deathly silent. Suddenly, the room plunged into darkness. The flashlight flickered, and when it stabilized, the woman was gone. But the whispers returned, louder and angrier. The walls seemed to close in around them, the air thick with unseen malice.
Run!
Ava screamed, grabbing Derek's hand. They bolted from the room, but the mansion seemed to shift around them. Hallways they had just walked through now led to unfamiliar places, twisting and turning into a disorienting labyrinth.
This isn't possible.
Derek shouted, his voice tinged with panic.
It's the spirits.
Ava said, breathless.
They don't want us to leave.
Doors slammed shut behind them, and the sound of footsteps echoed from somewhere above. Ava felt a cold hand brush against her shoulder and screamed. She turned, but no one was there. The whispers grew deafening, a cacophony of voices demanding their presence. After what felt like hours of running, they stumbled into a grand ballroom. At its center was a massive table covered in old photographs and notes. Derek picked up one of the pictures and froze.
"This can't be real,"
he said, holding it up to Ava. It was a photo of them, standing in the foyer of the mansion, taken that very night. Their expressions were frozen in terror, as though they had been caught in the act of trespassing.
How?
Ava whispered. Before Derek could answer, the whispers erupted into a deafening roar. The walls seemed to close in, and shadowy figures emerged from the darkness, their hollow eyes fixed on the intruders. Ava and Derek sprinted toward the nearest exit, their lungs burning with effort. Just as they reached the door, it slammed shut in their faces. A voice boomed, low and guttural.
You were warned.
Ava turned to Derek, tears streaming down her face.
I'm sorry,
she whispered. He grabbed her hand.
"We're getting out of here, together."
With one final push, they forced the door open and tumbled onto the lawn. The mansion loomed behind them, silent and still, as if it had never come alive. They didn't speak on the drive home. But when Derek checked his phone later, the footage was gone, replaced by a single message.
You can never escape.
Tonight, we'll explore the history and strange events surrounding Gore Orphanage. This is a place where people say you can still hear the cries of children and see shadows moving in the dark. Let's dive into the tragic history and the eerie tales that have kept this legend alive. Late at night, the woods near Vermilion, Ohio, feel completely silent and still. Hidden deep in those woods are the remains of Gore Orphanage, a place with a terrible history. A long time ago, this was an orphanage run by a couple named Mr. and Mrs. Sprunger. The couple claimed they wanted to care for children, but stories say life there was harsh. The children often went hungry, were treated poorly, and had little to no comfort. One night, tragedy struck. A fire broke out at the orphanage, and the building burned to the ground. Dozens of children were trapped inside and could not escape. Their cries for help were heard throughout the night, but no one could save them. What caused the fire is still a mystery. Some say it was an accident, while others believe it was intentional. The fire left behind only ashes and a story that has grown darker over the years. People who visit the site today say they can feel the sadness left behind. Some even claim to hear the faint sound of children crying or laughing when the wind is still. The land itself seems to remember the tragedy, with visitors describing a strange atmosphere that makes them feel uneasy, as if the air is heavier near the ruins. Local historians have searched for records of the orphanage, but much of its past remains shrouded in mystery. What little information exists tells a story of hardship and neglect. Reports from the time describe children who looked malnourished and scared. Some even speculated that the fire was set deliberately, perhaps by one of the desperate children hoping to escape the cruelty of their daily lives. Visitors to the ruins of Gore Orphanage often describe strange and unsettling events. Some say the air feels heavy, and the woods are unnaturally quiet. Others report hearing whispers or feeling as though someone is watching them. One group of friends decided to explore the site at night. As they walked closer, the air grew colder, and they noticed small handprints in the dirt. They said it felt as if the trees were closing in on them. Suddenly, they heard laughter, not happy laughter, but something eerie that made their skin crawl. Frightened, they ran back to their car and didn't stop until they were far from the orphanage. Another visitor, a historian interested in ghost stories, brought recording equipment to the site. During the night, she recorded faint voices saying, "Why didn't you save us?" She also heard what sounded like soft crying. The experience was so chilling that she never returned. In another incident, a family passing through the area stopped near the ruins to take photos. When they reviewed the pictures later, they noticed faint, childlike figures standing in the background. None of them remembered seeing anyone else at the site, and the figures seemed to fade in and out, as if they weren't entirely there. They were so unnerved that they deleted the photos, unwilling to keep the memory of their encounter. People have different ideas about why Gore Orphanage is so haunted. Some believe that the spirits of the children are still there, unable to leave because of the terrible way they died. Others think the land itself is cursed. Long before the orphanage was built, local Native American tribes warned settlers to avoid the area, saying it was a place of bad energy. Another theory is that the orphanage fire might not have been an accident. There are rumors of financial problems or even strange rituals performed by the orphanage's owners. While there is no solid proof, these stories add to the mystery of the site. Recent digs near the orphanage have even uncovered strange symbols carved into stones, which some believe are tied to the land's dark history. Some paranormal experts think the hauntings could be tied to the energy left behind by the fire. When something as tragic as the death of so many children happens, they argue, the emotional energy doesn't just disappear. Instead, it lingers, creating an environment where supernatural events are more likely to occur. Whether it's the spirits of the children or something else entirely, the area seems to hold on to its past in a way that defies explanation. Over the years, many people have claimed to experience unexplainable events at Gore Orphanage. Some have seen shadowy figures moving between the trees. Others have felt an icy hand touch them when no one else was there. One paranormal investigator spent a night near the ruins to see if the stories were true. She brought special equipment to capture sounds and movement. During the night, her gear recorded a voice saying, "It hurts," along with faint sobbing. She also felt like someone was standing behind her, even though she was alone. By morning, she was so shaken that she vowed never to return. Another eerie report came from a young couple exploring the area. They found an old broken music box near the ruins. When they picked it up, it began playing a creepy tune, even though it seemed too damaged to work. The couple left it behind and ran, but they said the melody haunted them for weeks. Other visitors have described seeing what looked like a fire burning in the ruins, only for it to vanish when they got closer. Some have even called the fire department, convinced that the orphanage was on fire again, only to find nothing but darkness and silence when help arrived. Even though the orphanage burned down more than 100 years ago, its story still captures people's imagination. Some see it as a reminder of the sadness and unfairness that the children endured. Others are drawn to the mystery, trying to figure out what really happened that night. Gore Orphanage has also inspired books, movies, and ghost hunting shows. Its legend has become part of local history, and people from all over visit the site to see if they can experience something paranormal themselves. Every year, new stories emerge, keeping the legend alive and growing. The area around the orphanage has become a popular spot for paranormal investigators and thrill seekers alike. Many of them leave with strange experiences to share, adding even more layers to the mystery. From odd sounds and cold spots to full-blown sightings of ghostly figures, the tales of Gore Orphanage never seem to stop. So, if you're ever near Vermilion, Ohio, and decide to visit the ruins, be prepared. You might hear voices in the wind or feel the cold touch of a ghostly hand. Remember the story of Gore Orphanage and ask yourself, would you dare to step into the darkness? Until next time, stay curious and stay safe. This is Shadow Fable, signing off. Tonight, we journey to the quiet town of Abbeville, Alabama, where an unsettling figure lurks in the shadows. Locals call her Huggin Molly. Is she a grieving spirit, a sinister force, or something in between? Stay with us as we unravel the legend of Huggin Molly, a story that's both chilling and unforgettable. In the small town of Abbeville, Alabama, there's a story everyone knows but no one wants to talk about after dark. Beneath the charm of oak-lined streets and old Southern hospitality, there's a dark figure that haunts the night. Locals whisper about late-night sightings, a towering shadow moving unnaturally fast, or the sound of eerie, disembodied laughter echoing through the quiet streets. For some, it's the phantom embrace that lingers most vividly, a cold, suffocating grip that leaves its victim shivering and speechless long after the figure has vanished. Locals call her Huggin Molly. She's said to be a ghostly woman dressed in black, towering over everyone, with arms that stretch out to pull you into a terrifying embrace. Tonight, we're diving into this chilling tale. Is Huggin Molly a protector, a warning, or something far more sinister? Imagine the town of Abbeville as the sun sets. The gentle hum of cicadas fills the air, blending with the distant creak of an old rocking chair on a weathered porch. The sky turns red and purple, and the streetlights flicker on, casting dim light over the narrow streets. The air is warm and heavy with the smell of pine and magnolia, mixed with the faint aroma of fried catfish from a nearby diner. But something about the night feels wrong. There's an uneasy silence, like even the crickets and frogs know to stay quiet. People hurry inside, locking their doors and closing their curtains. Parents tell their kids to stay close, whispering warnings like, "Don't wander off, or Huggin Molly will get you." No one wants to admit they believe the stories, but their nervous glances at the dark streets tell a different story. Abbeville's old buildings, with their weathered bricks and iron railings, seem to hold secrets of their own. The alleys are shadowy, the street corners feel darker than they should, and every sound seems amplified in the quiet. Even the smell of fried catfish from the local diner feels like a reminder of the normal life people cling to in a town haunted by its past. The streets seem to stretch endlessly at night, each turn feeling like a portal to another shadowy world. Abandoned lots, overgrown with wild grass and vines, seem alive with the whispers of things unseen. The groves beyond the town limits stand like sentinels, their twisted branches blocking out the stars. If you stop long enough to listen, you might hear faint sounds, footsteps, whispers, or the haunting cry of a woman. The story of Huggin Molly has been around for as long as anyone can remember. Some say she was a grieving mother, wandering the streets after her child died of fever in the 1800s. Others claim she was a strict schoolteacher who kept children safe by scaring them away from danger. But not all versions of the story are comforting. In some tellings, Molly is vengeful. They say her hugs aren't kind but chilling, her touch like ice that leaves people frozen with fear. Witnesses describe her as incredibly tall, her eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. If she catches you, her screams echo in your ears long after she's gone. Kids grow up hearing the stories, and many have strange dreams about Molly. In these dreams, she appears as a towering figure draped in shadow, her arms stretched wide as if preparing to embrace them. Some describe her whispering cryptic phrases, like warnings or pleas for help, though the words are never clear enough to understand. For others, the dreams are even more vivid. Molly's glowing eyes lock onto theirs, filling them with a bone, deep fear they can't shake even after waking. These dreams leave a lasting impression, making some wonder if she's trying to communicate a hidden message or simply reliving the moments of her sorrowful past. they dream of a tall figure standing over them, whispering words they can't understand. Some wake up with faint marks on their arms, as if they'd been grabbed in their sleep. These tales make Huggin Molly more than just a scary story. She's a part of the town's identity. Parents use the legend to keep their children safe, warning them to stay inside after sunset. Teenagers, emboldened by curiosity, dare each other to venture out at night, hoping for a glimpse of the infamous figure. But for those who've encountered her, the experience is anything but thrilling. A local farmer once claimed that his livestock began acting strangely one night, bleating and running in circles. When he went to investigate, he saw a shadowy figure standing at the edge of his property. "She just stood there," he said, "watching me." I turned back to the house, and when I looked again, she was gone. One summer night, Caleb and his friends decided to test the legend. Armed with flashlights, they walked to the old oak grove on the edge of town, daring each other to see how far they'd go. The grove was overgrown, the trees thick with vines, and the air felt cooler the deeper they went. Every sound, a rustling leaf, a snapping twig, made them jump. "This is dumb," said Mia, one of Caleb's friends. Her voice shook as she gripped her flashlight. "We should just go home." "It's just a story," Caleb said, though he didn't sound convinced. As they reached a small clearing, a high-pitched scream split the air. They froze. Their flashlights darted around, searching for the source of the sound. That's when they saw her. Huggin Molly stepped out of the shadows. She was enormous, her black dress flowing as if moved by an invisible wind. Her arms stretched out, long and skeletal, as if she was reaching for them. Panic took over. Caleb dropped his flashlight and ran, his heart pounding as Molly's laughter echoed behind him. The group scattered, each running blindly through the trees. When Caleb finally stopped, gasping for air, he realized something horrifying. The footprints he left behind were joined by larger ones, as if someone or something had been following him. The next morning, Caleb returned to the grove with a camera. The forest felt different in daylight, quieter, almost serene. But as he retraced his steps, he found something chilling. The faint outline of large, human-like footprints pressed into the soft earth, their shape unmistakably larger than his own. Dr. Eleanor Graves wasn't from Abbeville, but she'd heard enough about Huggin Molly to make her want to investigate. A folklorist and paranormal researcher, she set up in the local motel, turning her room into a research hub filled with maps, notebooks, and strange equipment. Dr. Graves talked to the townspeople to collect their stories. Mrs. Carter, a retired librarian, said she'd seen Molly when she was a child. "She hugged me so tight I couldn't breathe," Mrs. Carter said, her voice trembling. "But when I woke up, I was back in bed, and my parents said I was sleepwalking." Deputy Harris shared dashcam footage of a dark figure crossing the road. "We searched the area," he said, "but there was nothing. No footprints, no tracks, just nothing." Tommy Wells, a local mechanic, said Molly might have saved his life. "I was about to drive home drunk when I saw her. She screamed so loud I stopped the car. That scream's the reason I'm still here." Dr. Graves recorded strange things during her research. In the grove, the temperature dropped suddenly, and her audio recordings picked up whispers that no one else heard. The more she investigated, the more she believed Molly was more than just a story. During one late-night investigation, Dr. Graves left a recorder in the grove and monitored it from a safe distance. The device picked up faint humming, followed by a sharp cry that caused the equipment to malfunction. When she retrieved it the next morning, the recording was partially erased, but the words "stay away" were barely audible. Dr. Graves uncovered old records that added new layers to the legend. One theory was that Molly was a woman who lost her mind after her child's death and was sent to an asylum in the early 1900s. Another story connected her to a murder in 1923. A woman matching Molly's description was found strangled near the grove. Even older documents hinted at something darker. A map from the 1800s showed the grove as a burial site for victims of a yellow fever outbreak. Could Molly's spirit be tied to these graves? Or was she connected to the Veil Society, a secret group rumored to perform rituals in the grove? Dr. Graves began to suspect that Molly wasn't just one person but a force tied to Abbeville's history. In her journal, Dr. Graves wrote about a recurring dream she began to have. In it, a tall woman in black stood at the foot of her bed, whispering, "Leave us in peace." The dreams left her feeling drained, as though a piece of her energy had been taken. These experiences only deepened her resolve to uncover the truth. Determined to get answers, Dr. Graves spent days meticulously preparing for her night in the grove. She pored over her notes, reviewing every detail of the encounters reported by locals, and carefully planned her approach. She packed a thermal camera, a high-quality recording device, and a notebook, each item chosen with precision. As she entered the grove, her heart raced, and a chill ran down her spine. The trees loomed overhead, their gnarled branches forming a canopy that blocked out the moonlight. Despite her resolve, the oppressive darkness made her question if she was truly ready for what lay ahead. At last, she set up her equipment in a small clearing, her hands trembling slightly as she turned on the camera and recording device. She brought a thermal camera and a recording device, hoping to capture proof of Molly's existence. The night was eerily quiet, and every creak of the trees made her heart race. At 3 a.m., the air turned icy. Her camera picked up a glowing shape moving through the trees. And then Molly appeared. She was massive, her eyes glowing faintly. Dr. Graves froze as Molly's scream filled the air, louder than anything she'd ever heard. Her recording device malfunctioned, and the camera footage turned to static. When the sun rose, locals found Dr. Graves unconscious at the edge of the grove, clutching her journal. Her final entry read, "She's not evil. She's not good. She's a warning, a protector, and a curse. Beware the embrace of Huggin Molly." After the incident, her camera was recovered, though the footage was almost entirely corrupted. What remained was a single frame, a blurred figure cloaked in black, her arms reaching toward the lens. To this day, the story of Huggin Molly continues to haunt Abbeville. Some believe she's a ghost protecting the town, watching over its residents and intervening when danger looms. Stories like Tommy Wells's recount how her screams stopped him from driving drunk, perhaps saving his life. Others, however, see her as a spirit of vengeance, her chilling embrace and haunting presence punishing those who stray too far into the unknown. The contrast between these beliefs leaves the legend shrouded in mystery, making it impossible to determine whether she is a savior, a tormentor, or both. Others think she's a spirit of vengeance. But one thing is certain: if you're out after dark, watch your back. You never know when Huggin Molly might appear.